to Breaking the Grade.
Oliver Knott excelled in school from childhood through university. No surprise there because Knott was lucky enough to attend one of the UK's prestigious grammar schools, which set him on a path to success. But his brother, who did not attend the same school and struggled as a student, had a very different educational experience growing up until he was diagnosed with dyslexia, which changed his life and it changed Oliver's life too, dramatically. By listening to our show today about this champion for dyslexic people, including his brother, you'll learn about how Knott used his schooling and his brother's schooling to shape his early career and drives him every single day at International Dyslexia Learning Solutions, aka IDL. Why Knott returned to the more financially depressed part of the UK where he grew up, the northwest part, and how he plans to make a difference in his hometown. And finally, how working at a supermarket after college for 5 years gave Knott experiences that taught him a lifetime of lessons about the inequality facing people today. Breakers band together as we talk to a champion of all people, especially dyslexic people, Oliver Knott. Oliver, John Gamba, please join us.
Hey, Oliver. Great to
Hello.
have you.
Good afternoon or good morning where you are, at least.
It is. Good morning where we are, and you are exactly where right now?
So I am in an office in the northwest of England, a little place called Lancaster. It is the original Lancaster, not quite Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I think ours is a little cooler. It's just about an hour north of Manchester, so that's probably the only place people are going to instantly recognize. But yeah, so nice little small town.
Cool. John Gamba, tell the audience who you are and where you are, please.
Yeah, I'm in West Philadelphia right now, not too far from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Actually, some of my family's from out that way, so we have lots of great things to say about Lancaster. In fact, the political climate happening here with Dr. Oz and Fetterman are kind of fighting it out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So that's pretty interesting. But welcome, Oliver. I'm John Gamba, as you know, entrepreneur in residence and director of innovative programs at Penn GSE. We do a lot of work in this area of neurodiversity and working with students who learn differently. So this is going to be a great segment, and really excited to get to know you, your story, and how you see this issue.
Cool. And we can have a follow-up on the difference in the two Lancasters. But for now, let's talk about where it all started. And Oliver, this was kind of an interesting part of our pre-interview. So, just give our US-based mostly audience an idea of what is a grammar school, especially as it relates to the UK and your experience versus your brother's.
Yeah, fantastic. So just to introduce it to an American audience, grammar schools essentially were the benchmark of UK education. There was a national system that existed until the 1960s, which basically meant that any student, it doesn't matter where you come from, you can be the poorest person, you can be the richest person. You all have to do an 11 plus exam. So you have to pass English, math, science, and you have to pass to a standard. And it doesn't matter where you come from. If you reach that standard, you will get into the school, and that would give you the finest quality education on offer in the UK. And there was actually a time in the 60s and 70s where the US paid a lot of money to hoover up a lot of those graduates. And it was actually said, sorry guys, it was actually said that a set of English A levels was equivalent to an American college degree at that point, from that very, very high standard of education. Now that system was demolished, sort of in the name of equality, as they were deemed to be maybe a bit too elitist and taking away from other schools. So they would just leave everyone who didn't get into the grammar schools into the other schools, and those who wanted to perform, it seemed unfair. So they demolished that system, and now I think there's only about 50 left in the UK. And there was one local to me. And basically how it works now is they're not quite as equal, because basically if you can pay to get a tutor for your student, for your child, you can get your kid to get into there. If you live in the right zip code, you're going to get your student into there. So luckily, I live in quite a historic town, and I had the opportunity to take that test and pass that. And that's given me great opportunities in life. It allowed me to go to university. It allowed me to succeed and develop also connections as well. So when I'm applying for university, when someone hears you're from this school, you're from this place, that adds a little bit of weight to your application. So it is very important. So yeah, that's sort of what a grammar school is.
That was your experience, and but I think what's very interesting is I think we can probably relate wherever you are, whatever Lancaster you're in. There's always a great school probably around there,
Yeah.
where you get in, but then you might know somebody who didn't get in. It's not generally that it's your brother that didn't get into the same school. So how was that dynamic, and why did he struggle to get into the school?
Yeah, so my brother, he's about 3.5 years younger than me. He's a very intelligent person, smarter in many ways than I am. Could tie his shoelaces much earlier than I could. Unluckily, though, he has dyslexia, and he would just get told all the time, "You're dumb. You don't know how to do this. What are you doing? Why can't you do this?" Has had no confidence and failed the test, went to a state comprehensive nearby, and would just come home in floods of tears to my mum and just say, look, I can't do it. Why can't I be like my brother? Why can't I be like Oliver? And that's obviously a horrible thing to have to, as a parent, to see that from your child, as a brother to feel a bit guilty, as like, why have I been able to, go to this school? Why have I been able to be successful? Why is he dropping out of high school essentially, without the qualifications he deserves, really, because he's intelligent. So I saw that transition, and it's a shame and it's a tragedy, really, that schools, for example, weren't seeing dyslexia, recognizing it, analyzing, even looking for it at all in the students they had. And that meant that my brother only got his dyslexia diagnosis in the Royal Navy, so obviously the UK's armed forces. And it seems crazy that he had to wait till the age of essentially 21 to have that test done and now get the support he needs. So, for example, things like tinted glasses, which are really good for reading out words. For example, black text on a white background is really horrifying and confusing, and the letters get jumbled up, that sort of thing. So many different approaches, which small differences, even a little bit of extra time to be able to process the situation, to remove stress, that can make a massive difference in education, but also in the workplace. So now, having that diagnosis, he has been able to orientate himself and his career towards things that have a little bit of a different approach. He's a very hands-on guy. He's an engineer. And he's doing really great stuff now. Leaving the Navy, he's going to be working in renewable energy and solar panels and things like that. So he's going to be earning good money as well. So the point is that from that very sort of like sad beginning has come something good. But how many students, how many pupils don't get that? How many don't get the opportunity? And when they get knocked back, they potentially spiral out of control, or anything could happen. It's just that should be right at the beginning, supported, looked after, so no one has to go through that potentially horrifying situation.
Let's talk about that, Oliver. How have things changed in the UK since your brother was diagnosed when he was in the armed forces? Has that changed since that? What I would consider a tragedy that it took that long before the diagnosis. Is there a trend to change that moving forward?
Yeah, so it's a great question, actually, John. In regards to that, he's only a few years younger than me. So I graduated from high school in 2015. He graduated in about 2018. And we're sort of like a turning point, really, where things are coming into modernity, if you like. There's a change, a sea change coming. And now, I work with schools in the UK all the time, as well as with schools in the US. And schools in the UK are mandated now. There's a certain provision in law that schools have to have a certain amount of screening. So schools have to provide extra time. You're still going to get people who slip through the net. You're going to get people who, frankly, don't like certain students, or whatever the reason is. Things don't get flagged up properly. But generally, the right sort of procedures are in place, or at least it's going in the right direction. A few years ago, even 5 years ago, things were massively different. So things are looking really good right now. So thank God that's probably on its way out. And that's a really good thing to see.
Yeah, one more follow-up question there is, in the US, especially in the research, I work at a major research university who looks at this issue through the lens of demystification and looking at it to try to eradicate the stigma related to learning differently. I actually suffer from a learning difference myself, and have grown up to think and to be part of the shame of learning differently. Whereas the research now suggests that you have to look at this through an asset lens and not a deficit lens. Not only do some of the most famous entrepreneurs, world leaders have suffered or have dealt with a learning difference like dyslexia or ADHD or a host of others on the spectrum, but they have used that to their advantage. Some of them can think more creatively. Some of them can think more critically. Do you agree with that in terms of how we're trying to demystify learning differences and treat it through an asset lens versus a deficit lens?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things that before we would just look at it as a very much negative thing. And like, you can't in 2 hours, for example, regurgitate the correct amount of information to satisfy a very, rigid criteria of what success is, which is, might say that's an exam. But for example, I'm apparently good at that, but I'm not good in many other areas. So
Right.
it's great to have in education, but also when it comes to the workplace, moving forward from that, it's great to have a range of different thinkers. I'm not particularly creative, to be honest with you. I suffer at that. So I've got people I go to in the office. If I need to think of a great new idea, I'm talking to them about it as well. So it's all about having the range of perspectives and experiences in your team. And for sure, you've got people like Richard Branson. You've got some of the biggest entrepreneurs and world leaders that have neurodiverse perspectives and experiences, and that's so important, and that's where the agenda is going now. It's great to see it. There's so much great conversation on things like LinkedIn. When I'm going to education events, I went to the ISTE event in New Orleans last month, or was it the month before? And there's so many great conversations. The conversation is definitely moving in the right direction. It's such a pleasure to see that.
That's true. It was the month before, but it seems like it was many months ago.
Yeah.
It was in June. Before we kind of get to IDL and dig deeper, I did want to hit on one experience you had at the supermarket, where I bet you were kind of a little bit different than your colleagues, and you spent 5 years there. So, I think that's a neat part to hit on in terms of your journey. So can you take us back to the supermarket?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just gonna say it. I've had privilege in my life. A lot of people have, a lot of people haven't. But my family always had that mentality of like, always appreciate what you have and the world, and don't think you're better than anyone else for any reason. So when I was 16, as soon as I could work, I went out and got a job, and I always wanted to make sure that I didn't think I was too good for anything. So I started working at my supermarket. It initially was during my school studies, so I was doing that at the weekends, after school, that sort of thing, and I did that moving through when I went to college as well. And then when I finished college and I came back to the northwest of England, which is obviously where I'm from, there are areas very close to me which are more deprived socially, economically. And essentially, there would be working people from very diverse backgrounds there. And I'd see, for example, the lack of investment, the lack of hope sometimes that you'd have in a community like Morecambe, which is next to Lancaster in the UK. And you'd see, for example, voices and perspectives that weren't represented in Westminster, where all the decisions are made, and it's a tragedy. So it's all about neurodiversity, but it's also about inequality. And for example, in certain areas, if they don't have the same attitude to education, if they don't have a positive, inclusive vision of education transforming people's lives, then communities. People don't feel like there's any hope in Morecambe. People think they have to go to Manchester, they have to go to London. It's taking the youth away to a point where some places can just be left devastated. And working in that store, working with people from the diverse backgrounds, really enlightened me And what I want to do is bring those perspectives to the world stage, to bring those into conversations I'm having with people, so we can transform people's lives through the power of education.
Cool.
Yeah, that's another researcher, Dr. Mike Nakala, put it to me this way, just riffing off of that, Oliver, that so many times we get caught up into what can we do to support the neurodiverse student when we might have to code switch and we may have to flip the perspective. Why am I, if I am normal, going to be enriched by interacting with somebody who is more neurodiverse? And that gets into UDL and the Universal Design for Learning, and ensuring that we are recognizing that we're strengthened by our differences, and addressing, as you said, our privilege by working with people who are not similar to us, whether it's neurodiverse, whether it's people who come from underrepresented communities. That if we can really think about that, and you start seeing that in a lot of areas, boards of directors in Fortune 500 companies that are made up of super diverse personnel. I think that's important, that we not only think about, oh, let's pity those who are neurodiverse, but think about people who are not neurodiverse and how their lives can be enriched by interacting and having relationships and building relationships with people who may learn differently.
Those conversations are always the best. When you have those different perspectives, if you just have the same, you're just going to get stagnation. We're all about dynamic improvement. That's what I'm all about.
Yeah, that's great.
So, and when you say we, I believe you're probably referring to IDL. So talk to us about IDL. We're about halfway through here on the show, and this is when we kind of, go from kind of your personal journey to, your professional journey right now. And, talk to us about IDL, and then we're really going to have even deeper conversations about what you guys are passionate about at IDL.
Fantastic. So just briefly then, IDL, it's a little charity out the northwest of England. So it started as a little bit of a pipe dream. It was actually started up by a university in the UK, a college in the UK, a little project that wanted to create a solution for literacy students. So I think it was a parent in that university who thought, right, my student's not getting the support they needed. I'm going to start writing this little book. They wrote a little book to help learners move through language acquisition, getting rid of all that black text, the white background. So it started like very, very small from a single book, and then you had a CD disc that you had to burn the program onto, and you'd have to distribute it that way. And now it's an online software that caters to about 4,500 schools worldwide, across the America, across Middle East, across the UK, Australia, Hong Kong. And it's fantastic to see how much it's grown. And what we do is we offer a range of products. And as the charity sort of implies, a lot of those are free. So free literacy screening, so dyslexia, but also autism, ADHD. A lot of these things are picked up. Numeracy as well, so dyscalculia, associated requirements. And we've got times tables and mathematical equation practice as well, all for free. So that's all part of the vision, so that every student who needs it, sort of very familiar from my own perspective, what I've experienced is something I'm passionate about. I can say to educators when I speak to them, look, this is my perspective. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. I want to make sure that your students, your learners are going to have those tools, for no cost at all. You won't lose anything. If you don't like it, that's absolutely fine. But if you want to try it out, it's there for you. We then obviously have the interventions to follow up from the gaps raised. So we do have that whole package for educators to be able to use. A whole school, a whole district solution is what we generally go for. And that's all from the passion side of things. So we were a small charity, we've grown and grown and grown, and now we're able to offer that service around the world, which is really great to be a part of.
It's amazing. We have a similar organization that we work with right outside of Philadelphia, the AIM Academy, with Nancy and Pat, who are very focused on this issue, thinking about transformative ways to screen, intervene, and develop services to build skills for the neurodiverse, knowledge and skills for the neurodiverse, as well as the broader community, parents, educators, professional learning, how to, again, code switch and flip the lens on this issue so that we can be, more conscious. And through this advocacy, I can't believe it. Maybe you can comment on this, Oliver. Worldwide, how many people actually cope or actually are dealing with a neurodiverse challenge?
Now, I don't have the exact stat to mind, but I know that for dyslexia, I'm pretty sure it's 1 in 5 worldwide. And that's just one of many. And obviously those will obviously overlap sometimes they won't, they'll be exclusive. But we can say, if we're in a room with 5 or to 10 people, at least 2 of those are probably going to have something. And again, that's enriching conversations. That's great. We just need to understand it. We need to understand how to interact with them. We need to understand how to get the best out of every one of us and be understanding of that. So it's all about empowerment.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, empowerment of teachers, educators. What do you guys do? What should anybody out there, I guess, who's trying to tackle this problem challenge be doing for the educators in the classroom?
Yeah, so a lot of it we have to appreciate is educators are really working hard. This has been a really unprecedented time in the past couple of years, as we all know, and trying to maintain high standards whilst dealing with working from home, whilst trying to do with a massive catch up we've got from 2 years of disrupted schooling. It's very tricky. So educators are working very, very hard, and we need to make their jobs easier. As the market needs to react to that and provide those educators with solutions which are going to make a difference, but are also going to be not too demanding for them. So we're not talking specifically about IDL. Obviously, we do this, but a lot of other programs out there do it as well. The market does provide great solutions, which essentially allow teachers to implement programs remotely. They can be done with one teaching assistant supervising a group of 10 kids at once. They can have parents supervising at home. It means if a kid's isolating with coronavirus, or they're at home for whatever reason, if they're on the move, if they're using an iPad or a tablet, they can be doing their work from anywhere as long as they have an internet connection. And this is where the power of technology can make a massive difference, where teachers don't have to sit one-to-one with a student and spend a lot of time. Sometimes, obviously, that might be required, but we can take that pressure away for educators, make their job easier, make it so they don't have to spend hours and hours doing admin. Make that really easy for them. And again, when we're talking about things like dyslexia, color overlays are very important for how you read words. If that's all virtual, they can be changed, they can be customized and implemented at the click of a button. These things, it's just so important, and it just saves so much time. And it's all about regular, short bursts of activity to help learners excel and achieve, and to prevent burnout at the same time. So minimizing the need of one-to-one and getting parents and guardians involved. It really is very important. At the same time, you can integrate multiple aspects at the same time. So literacy, numeracy, your science, you can have all this all in one place. One thing we're just about to implement in the next year as well is a well-being resource. Now, I think we can all hold our hands up and said that, in the last couple of years, our mental health has taken a bit of a kicking at times, and some people react better to that than others. We're about to release a wellbeing resource for students to log how they've been feeling and to talk through, issues that they might be having, how to be emotionally resilient, and that sort of thing as well, which is really important actually in the modern world. The things of social media, we understand that can have negative impacts, as well as connecting us. Being connected to everyone all the time has its drawbacks as well. So the power of technology can be really important at making educators' lives easier, and we can do that in many different ways.
John, I'd love to hear you comment. I know you decently well, especially on the well-being part.
Absolutely. The infusion of social, emotional, and mental health supports as an intentional intervention across all spectrums of learners, neurodiverse all the way down to kind of your standard learners who don't struggle with neurodiverse challenges, is an interesting field. It's not like, oh, we just have to give you SEL. It has to be, how do we infuse SEL as a regular part of the curriculum to develop self-awareness, self-confidence, empathy skills. There's a whole world of how do we develop skills to have students be more empathic. So there's a whole field there. My question, Oliver, back to you is, where do you see the biggest opportunity for transformation in this field? Is it in the screening? Is it in the intervention? Is it in the metrics and how we track outcomes for how we're making a difference in serving students who are neurodiverse?
Obviously, the more data we get, or data, sorry, I can't even say that with the correct pronunciation, but essentially, the more data we get, the better our programs, the better we're able to adapt. I think the onset of AI is going to be massive for making these processes really smooth and easy to understand, and making that personalized learning work we give to students is going to be so appropriate for them as an individual, rather than like a one size fits all approach that we do tend to have often in mainstream education, which you can't help if you've got a class of 30 students with one teacher. They can't provide that personalized learning. No one could. And that's where things like AI can be massively important. I do think, obviously, there's always been a discussion about dyslexia. Literacy intervention has been on the agenda for a while. I think most states in the US have recognized it and are providing some provision for it. Not all, but we are getting there. The numeracy side of things, dyscalculia is really not got the attention it deserves. That's really rising up the agenda, and screening for that is getting ahead of the curve, because at the end of the day, states are implementing legislation now, mandating schools, you must screen a third grader for dyslexia. That's coming up in many states like Texas and ones nearby. I can't remember them all now. That's going to be happening with dyscalculia as well. Get ahead of the curve. So it's all about the power of technology, and technology is improving all the time. And I think the screening is massively important, picking it up early and knowing how to handle it. So it's about enriching knowledge. We need to have that at teacher training. We need that in college. We need to make sure that when people are going to college to learn to do teaching, they all understand when they're going into that, what technology can actually do for them and how it can make their jobs easier, but also help the lives of these students. So I think it's really early intervention is so important for the development of ability, but also emotionally as well. So well-being and being able to be confident in yourself, that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, I think advocacy and awareness is really key as well. In the States, we have WCAG WCAG 2.1 compliance, which looks at this issue through the lens of fairness and even legal compliance in most states. So for digital learning applications, there are standards that have to be met for this to be sold, or you open yourself up to OCR letters, Office of Civil Rights, which I believe the ADA and a lot of other advocacy groups have done a great job to advocate for students who struggle. And I think it's critically important because, as you said, 1 in 5, if you look at 55 million US-based students, if you're looking at 1 in 5, you're talking about millions and even tens of millions who suffer and could use the support of applications and screeners and interventions and tools like what you have at IDL, which I really applaud.
Thank you.
So this is the point in our show where we explain to you, Oliver, that from the bottom of our hearts, we're here to help. John can speak from his heart and his mind, really well on some of this stuff. I'm still learning it. My background is in tutoring and basically after school, but John brings this wealth of knowledge. So, I lend his support, I lend my support, I lend the support of the group of, breakers, as we call them, who we're getting together, which you are now one. Welcome. We're here to help, and I think your story resonates because it's a real one, and I can only imagine that when you talk about your brother in smaller settings, and we have an audience here, but that it really hits home. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and your brother, for sharing that story, because it really hit home for me, and I think for John as well.
An open invitation, Penn GSE and our ecosystem of support, Oliver, our Penn Literacy Network. We do a lot of briefings on transformative approaches to and tools that support those who learn differently. Our study councils with 70 superintendents from Southern Delaware to Northern New Jersey, briefings on students with disabilities and how transformative tools that help. And also we consider the Ames School outside of Philadelphia sort of a proving ground for creative ways to address this crisis and come up with creative and innovative ways to support students who do learn differently. So open invitation. We look forward to having you here for a briefing and for us to go there to see some of the work that you're doing hands-on in the UK.
That would be fantastic. And I'd just love to say thank you for facilitating this conversation, as it's not every day you get this opportunity. Obviously, I don't understand exactly everything about the nuances of the American education system. I'm learning as well. We're all learning, and it's great to have more conversations like this, and I really look forward to being part of the Breakers.
I think we need to have an exchange program between the two Lancasters,
That's what it's all about.
and check the schools out in Lancaster, PA, and then go over to Lancaster, UK, and pronounce it differently and do all those different things. There's a lot of love between the two Lancasters. They're just very different places.
Better football on your side of your Lancaster, I'm sure. Right, Oliver?
Yeah.
The real football.
Yeah, exactly. The OG soccer.
So we'll do that too. We'll go to games and we'll see what that's like, and we'll learn from each other. So, serious. Thanks for joining. We're here to help. It was a really great conversation, and we'll continue it offline. Thank you very much, Oliver, for joining us.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening, Breakers. Next time on Breaking the Grade.